Finally, in SEAL training, there's a bell. All you have to do to quit is ring the bell. Ring the bell, and you no longer have to wake up at 5 o'clock. Ring the bell, and you no longer have to do the runs, the obstacle course, the PT, and you no longer have to endure the hardships of training. If you want to change the world, don't ever, ever ring the bell.
You are listening to the Kill to Quit podcast hour presented by Kill Clip Performance Drinks.
Enjoy drinking Kill Clip after sweaty workouts, big rides, full rounds, long days, longer nights, or whenever you feel the need to get back up to full speed.
Kill Clip Performance Drinks for Warriors. Ignite, endure, recover. And now, Mark Zinno.
Welcome into another edition of Kill to Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. This week's guest is a former U.S. Navy SEAL and competitor in the CrossFit Games. He is Josh Bridges here on Kill to Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. Josh, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it for having me.
All right, so definitely a interesting background here after your time in the SEALs and a career-ending injury that kind of stunted your CrossFit career after the fact. But let's go all the way back to the beginning as a kid growing up. I mean, did you know you wanted to go into the SEALs? Was it just being an athlete? Was it just being competitive? What was it?
No, I didn't have any. I didn't even know what Navy SEALs were. I grew up in landlocked Missouri, St. Louis. I knew what Army Rangers were. I knew what Marines were. I didn't know what Navy SEALs even were back in early time. I grew up playing sports. That's what I did with my brother, and we played every sport there was. Baseball was kind of our main focus growing up, and then I played a lot of soccer. I played. We never played football like on a team, but we played football in the streets. We played basketball in the streets. I started wrestling in junior high, and then wrestled through high school, and then a little bit into college. I wrestled. And after college wrestling, I left college. I didn't finish college. I didn't get a degree. I just was only there for a year. Decided I wanted to go into the business world because I thought that's what I wanted. I was miserable for 3.5 years, but I met a buddy named Mike, and Mike was actually the guy who introduced me to both the SEALs, what they were, what they did, kind of how they trained, and also he introduced me to CrossFit at the exact same time. I remember just talking to him one day, and at that time I wasn't really working out very much. Just kind of focusing on being a loan officer, which was awful. And but he was like, "Hey man, I'm gonna start doing this stuff called CrossFit." And then down the road, I want to go try to be a Navy SEAL. It's something I've thought about since I was a kid. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I kind of started doing my research. And he's like, you want to try it? Try CrossFit with me. And I was like, kind of looked at it and I was like, sure, why not? It seemed kind of fun. So fell in love with it. And that was in January 2005. Kind of kept doing my research on the SEAL stuff and decided that why not?
Yeah.
At this point, I hated what I did, and really didn't have any reason to, I wasn't like scared to change jobs. At that point, it wasn't like I was like making a ton of money to where I was like, I got to stay here. I got to keep doing this. So, gave it a go, enlisted in March of 2007. And
And the rest is history, as they say. All right, before we get too far into that, let's go back because you got a full ride scholarship to college on wrestling.
Yes.
So, I mean, that was, that's not something that a lot of people can say they earned a full scholarship, athletic scholarship for any given sport. And you said you left after a year. What was,
Yeah.
I mean, if you got the ride and you were that good at wrestling, how come you didn't stick with it?
I don't know if I'd say I was that good. There are a lot of wrestlers out there that were a lot better than I was. I think at that time I was a really hard worker. I was decent at the sport of wrestling. I wasn't. I went to state and placed in my senior year, and I should have. I was ranked first going into the season the whole year, and ended up had a bad match in my semifinals match and lost 1-0. But yeah, so I got the scholarship, and I just really didn't. My mindset kind of shifted after high school, and I just wasn't really into school anymore. And I hated I hated my college wrestling coach. I didn't think he was looking out for me. Kind of had some animosity towards him. And so I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna take take a shot here. And I don't know if I regret it or if I kind of wish I would have, but I'm kind of glad I went the route I did, because if not, I don't think I ever would have found, the Navy and CrossFit and things like that. So
What did your parents say when you decided, you said you were leaving school or you were quitting wrestling?
Like my mom wasn't like super happy about it. But my mom also, like, she wasn't always like the most forceful when it came to schooling. She wasn't like, you got to get your schooling, you got to do this, you got to do this. It was kind of something that I kind of had to keep motivating myself. My mom doesn't even have, she didn't even finish high school. And so I credit my mom with showing me what it means to be a hard worker, and that, like, no matter what it is that you have to do, you got to get the job done. Like, she didn't get a high school diploma, but she worked her ass off and provided for me and my brother and sister growing up, and showed me what it meant to be like, hey, sometimes you just got to get the job done, whatever it is. Maybe you won't like it, maybe it isn't something you want to do, but you got to do it. So, but when it came to schooling, she wasn't really as like, hey, you need to get your schooling done, you need to do this. So when I left college, she wasn't upset. I told her this is what I want to do. I want to go into the business world, and she was supportive.
So when you got into the business world, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do there, or was it just the first job that came along, the best paying job? What was the kind of decision point for just getting a regular 9-to-5 deal?
Yeah, at that point, it was kind of just like finding a job. I wanted to go into sales. I didn't know what line of sales, but I thought that was what I wanted. I found out very fast that I did not want to be in that field at all. So yeah, I got a job working as a telemarketer at SBC, which is now AT&T, the phone company. And like, I was the guy literally who would call you to try to sell you call waiting, call forwarding, those types of things.
You're dating yourself here, Josh.
I know, right? I know. It was awful. And, but it made me realize that I never want to have one of those jobs again. So after doing the phone company, I went into the loan officer side. So I was the guy who, when you went to refinance your house or sell your house, I was the guy who gave you buy a new house. I was the guy who gave you the loan to do that. So, and I did that for 3 years. And yeah, every day, I remember just sitting in a cubicle one day and being like, this is my life for, 40 more years, 50 more years, if this is really what you're going to do. And I just remember being like, I can't do this. This isn't me. This isn't who I am. And I thought it was. I thought that's what I wanted. But man, I found out really fast that it was not what I wanted.
Did you ever think back to, in those moments, look back and go, I should have stuck it out with wrestling. I should have stayed in college. I should have done any of those things?
Yeah, there was definitely some moments of regret. When I was in those, like when I was at SBC, when I was at doing the loan officer job, like there was definitely times like, man, I wish I would have just stuck with it, and gone back and stayed and finished the wrestling. But then once I found CrossFit and I started really thinking about the military, it all kind of like came together, and it was like, it happened for a reason. And I now I don't have any regrets, like it just, I'm glad it happened. I lived those 4 years of really, really crappy job that I hated. I hated who I was. I hated my job. I hated everything about it. And it just made me realize, like, man, like, you don't have to live that life if you don't want to. You just have to work really, really hard and, find something that you're truly passionate about.
He's Josh Bridges, our guest this week on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. Josh is a former Navy SEAL, competed 6 times in the CrossFit Games, 3 top 10 finishes, and he is our guest this week on Kill the Quit. So you're sitting at this desk, and you have CrossFit on the side, and your buddy tells you he's going to go be a Navy SEAL. and do the CrossFit thing, and you're in on it, but do you really at this point know what you're getting into?
Yeah, I started to do my. Once I decided to actually go into the SEALs. Like I'd done my research, as much as you can without really knowing any SEALs and not really being around them or anything like that. Like if you grew up in San Diego, you could probably find someone and actually get some real deal like information, like, hey, like, yeah, this is training, like, but this is after training. This is when you actually become a SEAL. Like when you put your trident on your chest, like what the job is and what it is and what it entails, because all you could really research back then when I was going in was you could watch. There was a documentary on Discovery Channel called 234, which was just basically was BUDS, basic underwater demolition SEAL training, which is your first part of training to become a SEAL. So you could do your research on that. And there was a few books back then, the Dick Couch books, and I read all those, and I tried to research as much as possible, and I had an idea of what I was getting myself into, and for me, it was like, this is the most difficult training in the military. This is exactly what I want now. Like this is what I want to do. And then, you go through BUDS and SQT and you get through the training and you realize that's not even the hard part. The hard part is when you actually, are overseas and, everything's on the line, not just if you're going to make it to be a SEAL or not.
When you put together like wrestling and then CrossFit, did it prepare you physically for being a Navy SEAL?
Yeah. Yes. I actually, after going through, I used to always think, like, if I could, prepare someone to be a Navy SEAL, like if the first the sports I would have them growing up playing would be wrestling and water polo. And I felt like those two, I felt like a lot of the guys that went through that I met and became friends with, most of them were either water polo players or some sort of wrestling background or something like that, or they were hunters growing up. And those three things, I felt like most of the guys who made it through the training program had one of those aspects in their background. So yeah, I think that CrossFit had a huge, enormous role in playing on my success going through training. And then my wrestling background which was just like, never quit, never give up, always outwork the next guy in the room. That never, like, I'll you're going to have to rip me off this mat, to beat me. So I think that those were huge roles in my life to get me through the training.
Now, you get into the SEALs, in the mid-2000s. I mean, 9/11 has happened already. We have 2 full wars going on. None of that stuff ever deterred you. None of that stuff popped in your mind as maybe thinking, I might really want to give this decision some more thought.
No, not for me. That was actually one of the, like, I grew up in a Democrat household because my family was all in the Union, right? And so I thought I was like more liberal, I guess, on my viewpoints. And then once 9/11 happened, like everything shifted in my life. Like I no longer, like I didn't hate unions, but I didn't like what I felt like they stood for. And I just kind of, like all of my viewpoints shifted, and I became very patriotic, and I loved my country, and I loved what it provided for every person in the country. And it kind of, like, I did, I feel like when I get involved with something, I go full in, right? So when all that happened, I joined like the Young Republicans and did all these things with the political side of stuff, and it just grew and grew and grew in me. And I felt like I had this calling that I wanted to do this, that I wanted to go in and, join the military and serve my country and, give back to what I felt like I was blessed to have, the opportunity to live in this country and be a U.S. citizen. So for no reason alone, I thought it was just a great opportunity. And I was super stoked to be able to be a part of that. And And then, once getting through the training, everyone asks you like, oh, do you really want to go to war? It'd be like, well, yeah, I want to go to war. I just trained for, 2.5 years to be a professional soldier. And it'd be like Tiger Woods always just practicing and never playing a game of golf for real. So
forgive the divisive nature of this question, but did your new Republican ideals clash with your parents' Democratic ones?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, really?
Yeah, of course. It was, I was like the only one in my family. There was like maybe like 3 or 4 in my family. Cause I mean, everyone in my family were pipe fitters. They were the pipe fitters union. And, so they were all, very hardcore Democratic and,
Did they at least appreciate your patriotism, so to speak?
No, they did. They did. They did very much so. They didn't. My mom was not supportive of me going. So it was kind of funny. She supported me when I wanted to leave school, but when I told her I wanted to be going to the Navy, she was not happy. I wouldn't say she wasn't unsupportive. She definitely was not happy about it. Happy about what the possibilities of what that meant was. So,
do you think that was more? I assume it's more because it's her son, not a political dissension kind of thing.
No, nothing due to the political side of it. It was more of just, exactly that I was her son, and there's a very high likelihood that I'd be going to war, and so yeah, that was it.
Did your mom? I'm sorry to cut you. Did your mom know the difference between just going in the Navy and being a Navy SEAL, or it didn't matter to her? She didn't care.
She didn't care. She didn't. I don't know if she completely understood it until I had to explain it to her. But yeah, once I did, it didn't make her feel any better. I mean, I told her, I told her, I was like, listen, like most people who go to war or go overseas are undertrained. I'm like, I'm going to be so overtrained. It's going to be crazy. So, and it didn't matter. And I know I'd probably feel the same way if it was my kids. If my kids ever told me that, like I obviously will never steer them away from the military because I think it's a great thing. And if they want to do it, I'll support them 100%. But, I'll still be scared and nervous and worried, that because I lost friends. I lost buddies, overseas. And so, having that be your son come up to you and say, or son or daughter and say, this is what I want to do. You're going to be a little nervous, and so I think any parent would.
He's Josh Bridges, our guest this week on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff, former Navy SEAL, CrossFit athlete. When we come back, we'll take Josh's journey through BUD/S and into the Navy SEALs and on to deployment. Don't go anywhere. This is Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Kill the Quit podcast hour, presented by Kill Cliff Performance Drinks.
Kill Cliff, performance drinks for warriors to get you up, get you through, and get you back to full speed.
And now, back to the show with host Mark Zinno.
Welcome back to Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. This week's guest is a former Navy SEAL and competitor in the CrossFit Games 6 times, finishing in the top 10 3 times overall. He is Josh Bridges, joining us on Kill the Quit. Josh, when we last left off, you were entering into the Navy and you're going into BUD/S. You told us how physically you were prepared through your CrossFit training and wrestling career and everything else. When you actually get there, are you overwhelmed at the very beginning?
No, never really. The thing so when you go into the Navy, right, every single person who joins every enlisted side of the military has to go through basic training. And that's a 2-month stint in the Navy. It's 8-week, 8-week course in the Navy. And you basically learn the basics of being in the military. Like you learn about, the Navy history, you learn about basic, just like they try to basic discipline, ironing your clothes and, cutting your hair and how your standards are and things like that. And so during those 8 weeks, I was just like, I need to work out more. I was used to working out for 3 to 4 hours a day leading up to this. And I'm like, I'm getting out of shape. I would literally, like, the only thing that was really overwhelmed me was the fact that I'm like, I got to go to BUD/S right after this. And I'm going to lose everything that I gained in these 8 weeks. And so I would go into the bathroom at night and like work out when you weren't supposed to. Like, like you're supposed to be sleeping, and I would like sneak into the bathroom, and there was like a shower stall, and I would do, push-ups and pull-ups on the bathroom stalls and things like that, just to like keep myself from losing my mind, knowing that I was like losing what I felt, something that I had worked so hard to get in as much shape as I was in, and then I was going to lose it because of these 8 weeks of basic training.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of maniacal, but I almost get it. When you got your contract into the Navy, so you were literally one of the few people who was able to go to basic and then right to buds right after?
Yeah, I had a contract going straight that was guaranteed that you would go to buds right after basic training.
That's rare, isn't it?
I think it was more rare, like just before my time, but then now it's definitely a program that I think a lot of kids come in signed up for, because they have whole divisions in boot camp that are just strictly like SO rates. So it's like every single person in the boot camp class is going to buds. At least they did when I was going through. I wasn't in one of those classes, but yeah, like I think it's more common now that you can actually get a contract to go to buds, because prior to SEALs didn't have a rating in the Navy, so they didn't have like it was more of like a collateral duty if you wanted to go be a Navy SEAL. And then around, I think a few years prior to me enlisting, they actually they gave SEALs their own rate, which is SO. And so if you're an SO, that means you're a Navy SEAL.
Gotcha.
And so now it's like you can sign up to get that job. You just have to perform a test, a physical test, and pass a written test to get that contract.
Well, because listen, as we've talked a lot about here on Kill the Quit with other former Navy SEALs, is that the dropout rate at buds is extremely high, and so less than 30% of the class usually finishes and ends up becoming a Navy SEAL. And so with that, you still have to have a job in the Navy. It's not like they send you home and say, "Hey, thanks for coming out." So from that standpoint, it was my understanding that typically they would make you go get your military occupational specialty first before they sent you to buds, so at least they knew what you could do in the Navy if you didn't get through.
Right, exactly. Man, that was, I think, how it was run before I got in. And then I think just a couple of years prior to when I got in, they actually started the SO rate, and then which means that you could sign up to go straight to buds. So I think I was on the front end of that when that all started.
Okay, so I mean, but basic training is entirely different, night and day different than buds. So there was no kind of culture shock there?
No, it wasn't. Yeah, it's very different. Yeah, very different. Like you're literally just, you're ironing your clothes, marching, learning about basic naval history, and things like that. And it wasn't really a cultural shock for me. It was just, for me, it was just like, let me get through this so I can go to buds. Let me go do what I want to do. So if I have to do this to do it, then that's fine. Then I'll do it. So it didn't matter at that time in my life. Like I had the mindset where nothing was going to stop me. Like nothing was going to stop me from reaching my goal. And so if this was an 8 week, it was just 8 weeks of my life that I had to deal with.
Yeah. Okay. I understand that. I'm just wondering, because when you get into buds, look, they strip everybody of their rank. It's nothing but a name, and that's it. So, at this point in time, there are kids who are younger than you. There are guys who are probably your age and older, because you didn't get into the Navy till you were a little bit older, right? You were in your mid-20s?
Right, yeah. I think I was, so I went in 2007, so I was 24, or 23 when I went in. So,
okay. Did you feel like you were kind of, at any point in time, outmatched by people who may be older or younger, more experienced than you?
No, not at all. I felt, like I just remember being told, like, hey, when you're in buds, you want to be gray. You don't want to stand out. You don't want to, and stand out on the good side or bad side, really. Well, not so much on the good side. Like it does, like you're not going to get in trouble for being good at something, but like you just want to be as gray as possible, and just, and stay away from negative people. And so for me, I never felt outmatched. Like I'm such a super competitive guy that I still wanted to win the runs, I still wanted to win the swims, I still wanted to have the fastest time in the O course, and then also be good at the other stuff like the diving, and I wanted to be good at shooting and the tactics and everything like that. So I never felt outmatched. I actually felt like having a fresh start with not really knowing. I'd never even shot in a gun other than a BB gun before joining the Navy. So I felt like I was really open to taking like instruction. And, I have some of the best instructors in the world, teaching you how to shoot guns and tactics. So
pretty impressive. And physically, you were up to every challenge, right? Did you ever feel like you were physically just worn down?
No, I felt like the physical side of buds for me wasn't even the hardest thing that I'd ever done.
What was?
I felt like college wrestling. I mean, that 1 year of college wrestling, like that was just brutal. Like you went home every day so beat up. And I mean, I remember in preseason before college wrestling, even before the season started, I mean, we'd have preseason practices just at the stadium alone, doing stadium runs where we'd watch 3 different sports come and go while we were still just doing our conditioning part of our workout. I mean, it was insane. And I don't know if it was just me not ever having gone through something that hard. And then that made that seem so much harder than buds. But yeah, that was just brutal. And I think it really prepared me to be able to, handle buds, the physical aspect of it. Don't get me wrong. The physical side of buds was really, really hard. It was just, it was for me, I was like, man, I'm getting paid to be here and to work out. Like I would do this stuff for free. So it never really like I never got upset or, disgruntled because I had to work out anymore.
He's Josh Bridges, our guest this week on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Killcliff. Josh, again, a former Navy SEAL and competitor in the CrossFit Games, finishing in the top 10 3 times throughout his career. And you are in the middle of buds, and I asked this of all the Navy SEALs that I interview because we talked about the attrition rate being so high. And for those who aren't familiar, when you want to get out and you say you've had enough, there's a bell you go ring, and it's DOR, drop on request, and once you ring that bell, you're done. You're allowed to get your gear and go home and just go back to being a regular individual in the Navy. When you heard that bell ring, what did it mean to you?
It meant that, when you're in buds, it almost is this like it's a motivator. You're like, yeah, another guy couldn't make it that as far as I could in this training, and like you don't wish it upon anybody. But it definitely is a satisfying feeling of being like, yeah, like that guy wasn't good enough. That guy wasn't strong enough. That guy wasn't mentally tough enough to get to this point in the training. And I am, and I'm still here, and so like it was a as terrible as it sounds, it was such a huge motivator hearing other people quit when you did it, before you, or, not that I ever thought about quitting, because I really didn't. And I'm not just saying that just to be the tough guy, cool guy. It was just, for me, it was like, this is it. Like I've lived the other part of life that like most people have to live in a cubicle and doing a horrible job. And I don't ever want that again. And like, so like, they're going to have to drag me off this beach. Like there's nothing they're going to do to make me have to want to quit. So
why did you think that guys quit? Was it more physical or more mental?
I think it's both. I think that some people aren't physically ready for the challenge. They hadn't gone through something like college wrestling, or they haven't prepared as well. Maybe they just thought because the test to get into buds is not hard. It's like I want to say it's like an 11-minute mile and a half. You have to do like 50 push-ups in 2 minutes and 50 sit-ups in 2 minutes, and then like 8 pull-ups. Like the physical test is not a good standard to be like, yeah, this guy's ready for buds. Not even close. So I think that having such a low standard to get to pass that test, I didn't think it did it serve, it didn't provide the right type of person the 100% of the time, like it allowed some people who thought that, oh yeah, this is it. If I could pass this, then I could become a Navy SEAL, which wasn't the case at all. And then I think that I think it's probably more on the other side though, where it's mental than physical, because I think that a lot of people just can't get past the day-to-day grind, because it's buds is 6 months, which is just the first half of training. Like you still have to go to SQT after buds, and that's another 6 months before you get your trident, and then you go become a new guy at a team, and you're still not really like, yeah, you have your trident on your chest and you can call yourself a Navy SEAL, but you're still proving yourself, for the rest of your career. So the mental side of it for people, like every day, you'd be up on your feet for 18 hours a day, like moving, not nonstop moving. And then the moment you got to sit down, it was just to, learn something that you had a test coming up on or something like that. So I think that day-to-day grind just started to grind on people, and they couldn't mentally get past the fact that it's like they couldn't take it one day at a time or even one evolution at a time. They thought about how much farther they had to go. And it was just like, I can't do that, instead of just being like, it is what it is. This is awesome. Like, I get to get paid for this. So I think it's a little bit of both, but if I had to guess, I'd say it's probably more mental than physical.
All right, so after you finish Buds and you go through the rest of your SEAL training, what's that moment like when you finally get your trident?
It is a very short-lived, great day. You have basically you have 24, a little more than 24. You have probably about 48 hours of feeling like a rock star. Like, I am the man. Like, I earned this. And then you immediately show up at your team the following Monday, and you are very quickly shown that you haven't done anything that anybody else at this command has done. And, and you're very quickly put in your place, which I think, you need it to be. You need it to be that way. So get to celebrate for a very short time, 48 hours, have a good time, feel amazing. Everyone tells you how great you are and how awesome it is what you've done, and you feel great, and you're proud of your accomplishment, but you have to quickly realize that it's not over, and it's actually only going to get harder from here.
When that thought settles in, when you look back on the experience of Buds, it's like almost like you went through this whole entire incredibly tough, just the whole thing to only feel like you're going right back to the bottom of the mountain again. No?
Yeah, no, it's exactly what it is. I mean, it's kind of like when you graduate high school, and then you go to college, and you feel like, you graduate high school and you're like, yeah, like I'm the man, like this is, you're at the top of the totem pole in high school when you're a senior. And then, you show up at college again and you're back to being a freshman, you're back to being the low guy on the totem pole, and, nobody cares. So, it's kind of that same feeling. And, but it's good, it's the nature of the beast, and it's what every single person that goes through the pipeline does. It feels the same way, and it's not like, this sucks again, I'm just a turd. It's like, no, this is awesome. Now there's more responsibility. Now I get to actually like go learn really cool stuff, and and show these guys that I'm here, and I want to do this job, and I want to be a Navy SEAL. I didn't want to just earn my trident and that's it. I want to do this job, and I want to do it really, really well.
How quickly do you get to your first deployment?
I actually, so I was one of the lucky ones where I actually deployed about 14 days after I graduated from SQT, which is SEAL qualification training. So that's the second part of Buds. Well, not the second part of Buds. It's right after Buds. So the Buds is 6 months. That's your basic underwater demolition SEAL training, and then you go to SQT, which is SEAL qualification training, and then which is a little bit more advanced, I guess. Buds is basic, it's very basic stuff, and then SQT is a little more advanced. You actually start to do close quarters combat, mobility, land warfare. You start diving, things like that. So it's a little more advanced, and then you get your trident. And so when I got my trident, I showed up to my team on Monday, and they were like, and our team was already deployed overseas to, their locations. And we show up, and they're like, pack your things, boys, you're deploying in 10 days. So I ended up deploying literally like about, I want to say it was like 2 weeks after I got my trident to meet my team out in Iraq, which was, an unbelievable opportunity. And looking back on it, like scary as hell, because you really know so little getting out of SQT before you actually like do a full workup with a platoon in a team. But yeah, I got to do a very short 2-month deployment overseas in Iraq with SEAL Team 3. And it was a great opportunity.
He is Josh Bridges, our guest this week on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. We come back. Josh finishes his time in the Navy, and it's on to the CrossFit Games that's coming up next. Don't go anywhere. This is Kill the Quit, brought to you by Killcliff.
You are listening to the Kill the Quit podcast hour presented by Killcliff Performance Strengths, proud partner of the Navy SEAL Foundation.
Welcome back to Kill the Quit, brought to you by Killcliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. This week's guest is Josh Bridges, former Navy SEAL, competitor in the CrossFit Games with 3 top 10 finishes to his credit. When we last left off, Josh was finishing up his time deploying to the Middle East in the War on Terror. And when you finish up your time in both of your deployments, how do you know your time in the Navy is done? Why did you want to get out and move on to something else?
Oh, I ended up doing 3 deployments total, actually. And so for me, on my last deployment, I ended up getting injured my knee. That's when I dislocated my knee. And I just kind of decided, I didn't really decide that I didn't want, I wanted to get out at that moment. I was actually like, I still had some more time left on my contract, and I went to a training command to kind of keep rehabbing my knee, and just to get a little downtime. I already had my second son at that moment. I wanted to spend some time with the kids and be home a little more than when you're in a platoon, because when you're in a platoon, you almost never are home. I would say you're gone 80% of the time. Even when you're home, you're not home. So yeah, at that time I was I actually started competing in my second second workup. So in 2011 is my first year competing at CrossFit. It was just, I kind of had, I'd been following CrossFit, obviously, and I'm still doing CrossFit at the time. And in 2011, I kind of looked at the CrossFit Games season and just kind of looked at my workup schedule, and everything just kind of aligned to where I didn't really have to miss anything to compete. And so I asked my chief at the time, I was like, hey, I want to compete in the CrossFit Games. I have to qualify, and to do so, I might have to miss like a couple of days of the training on this date. And he's like, well, what's your Fran time? And I was like, I told him my time, which at the time, 2:02 or something like that. And he's like, okay, you can do it. And so that was really, so I ended up, that year in 2011 during a workup, which I look back on, and that is one of the most impressive years that I've ever thought of, because we were in a workup, we were, working to deploy, and to Afghanistan, and it was gung ho on that side, and then I'm still training just as hard. So we'd come off of doing, 3 hours of working in the desert in 120 degrees, and I would have to, instead of going and take a nap between work stuff, I would actually have to go work out. And so I look back on that year and taking second at the games, and it just kind of blows my mind that I was able to accomplish that.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. I just want to go back real quick. How did you tear up your knee? What happened?
I was overseas and, wrestling around with a buddy, and he landed on it. Like, I picked him up and double legged him, and he kind of landed on my leg funny, and basically it just collapsed, and it was 45 degrees out the wrong way. So it tore every ligament except for the LCL. So it tore my ACL, PCL, MCL, meniscus. How did that go over with your command, that you guys are kind of horse playing around, and that's how it happened? I think things happen on deployment, it's not like something they're stoked about by any means, but in the end, it's like things happen, you get, sometimes even when you're busy, you get bored because there's nothing else to do. You're around the same people all the time. You get on each other's nerves sometimes, so things just happen. And they took it well.
Well, I mean, listen, that's extensive rehab, man. I mean, that's at least a year. Right.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I was actually shocked that, so I had that injury, and I had it repaired in May 11th of 2012. And I still ended up actually qualifying for the games in 13 and taking 7th in the games that year, which, and that again was like 11. I was shocked that I was able to do that. The moment it happened, I was just like, man, I don't know what, I felt really good. I was training really well still over in Afghanistan, still working out really hard while doing our missions and stuff like that. And so, it was kind of crazy. And then that happened, and I was like, oh crap, and I remember after I got flown to out of our little camp to a big base in Afghanistan, and they immediately started doing they were like, we got to CAT scan your knee because of when you dislocate your knee that bad, when it's like a full dislocation, there's a lot of arteries and veins that run behind your knee, and if any of those are ruptured, they actually have to amputate. And that's what the doctor told me. And I was like, hold on. I'm thinking I got I tore my ACL, I tore my knee out, but it's just going to be a hard rehab. But this doctor's telling me they might amputate my leg, and this is over in Afghanistan still. So I'm
wow.
I'm losing my mind at this point. And, and obviously everything turned out okay. And, the rehab, I immediately got home, and I remember just thinking in my head, this isn't going to stop me. I'm not going to give up on any part of my life, being a Navy SEAL or being a CrossFit athlete. So, I got back. I remember going to the doctor for the first time, and the doctor's like, well, you're gonna have to pick a new job. And I remember just getting up and being like, fuck you, bro. And I walked out of that doctor's office. So, I was just, it was a hard time, but for me, I never lost hope in either side that I wouldn't get back to where I was.
Did the Navy want to medically retire you at all, or no?
No, they didn't have, they're just like, let's perform the surgery, let's get the surgery done and get you back. And I actually got I was shocked at how fast I was back to I remember asking my physical therapist after the surgery, I'm like, when can I squat again? And she's like, maybe in 10 weeks, air squat, and I remember doing sets of 10 box squats at 225 at week 8. I was I was hard charging on that rehab, and just went after it and did everything I could. I was doing going outside, not only using the PT at work, but getting stuff on the outside, getting acupuncture and body work on my own, to get back even faster. So, and I remember getting cleared in the military. When you're injured, you have limited duty. This guy can do some of his job, but he can't do all of it. And I remember getting cleared fit for full duty so fast. I want to say it was at 6 months or 5 months out after that surgery. So
amazing stuff. He is Josh Bridges, our guest this week on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff, former Navy SEAL, CrossFit athlete, as he has 3 top 10 finishes in the CrossFit Games to his credit. So, you make that decision to get out of the Navy, right? And you still want to continue your CrossFit career, despite the fact that you have this catastrophic knee injury.
Yeah. So I didn't. So I stayed in the military until October of 2015.
Okay, you did stay that long.
Yeah. So I was in for another 3 years after the injury, working at the training command and being an instructor. And I love that part of that job. It's kind of your way as a Navy SEAL, kind of giving back to the community, because when you're in a platoon, you're just a hard charging, team guy getting after it. And then nobody really wants to go to the training command unless they, have kids or something like that, or an injury to rehab. Most time when you're a team guy, you want to be in a platoon. You want to be, getting ready to deploy or deployed. So I went to the training command and became an instructor, which was actually a really awesome. I loved that part of the job. It was really fun. And you learn so much as being an instructor, because you're teaching something that we do, and it's a great way to build your own skills as well. So so I did that for 3 years, and then decided it was my time to re-up. And at that point I was kind of like, you know what, I want to give this CrossFit thing 100%. I want to actually see what I can do when I can actually fully focus on that and not focus on both of my, both being a Navy SEAL and a CrossFit athlete. So got out in 2015, and I was excited to be able to be home a lot more for my kids and see my kids and coach their sports and things like that. So it's been an amazing ride, and I wouldn't change it for anything.
What was physically tougher, getting through the Navy SEALs and BUDS, or competing in the CrossFit Games on a surgically reconstructed knee?
I think it's 2 very different things. I think that they're both very challenging. They're both really hard. They both take a lot of commitment and dedication, and a lot of hard work. But they're just different, right? Because in the end, a CrossFit is a sport, and at the end of the day, you get to go home, whether you win or lose or whatever happens, and you get to go on to the next day. And in the Navy, like, not everybody gets to come home, and that was the hardest part. That's a struggle. Like, and not only if you not come home, or maybe you don't get to come home, but even losing someone, losing a close friend, and things like that. It's a very different feeling than losing at CrossFit. Losing at CrossFit, oh well, like, okay, I had a bad day, big deal. You have a bad day in the Navy, you or your buddy might not come home, and that's a very big deal. So just very, very different.
Well, it's the old Navy SEAL adage, the only easy day was yesterday, right?
Right, exactly.
So, but let me ask you, you have 3 top 10 finishes, a second place, a 7th, and a 4th. For somebody who's so competitive, does it ever kind of burn you up a little bit that you weren't able to take home first place?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course. I mean, that was the ultimate goal, From the very beginning, it was always to win the games. And even taking second, like, I remember just being like this. I remember walking in the back with Rich, who won that year, and I was like, wow, your medal's so much better than mine. But in the end, I don't even know if I'm done competing yet. I'm still gonna get after it, and continue to see if I'm still competitive or not. And so, but yeah, it's definitely something hard to swallow, but it's easier to swallow when you realize the opportunity that just being able to be an athlete and train full time, like the opportunities it's provided me. So it's been amazing. And don't get me wrong, like, it's definitely has left a taste in my mouth not winning, but at the end of the day, it doesn't define who I am. It doesn't define how hard I've worked. And so that's kind of how I have to deal with it.
Any desire to go back into the games?
Oh, of course. I'm not done. So we'll see what I have to redo my knee. I'm actually going to have to get 2 surgeries done on my knee, the same knee that I dislocated back in 12. Had basically all of the ligaments have retorn that were torn. And this year I almost wasn't able to go to the games. After regionals, basically I couldn't run or squat or lift really heavy. And so I had to change my mindset going into this year's games and being like, if I get through this, if I get to participate in all of the events, it's a win for me. And so I did. And I was actually shocked. It's probably my 3rd proudest moment of my career that I actually made it through this year's games with what I knew I was dealing with on my knee. So
what are the other 2?
I think, like taking second during that workup in 2011 was huge. And then getting back after that first surgery was probably a big accomplishment as well.
When you kind of put it all together, do you ever look back at the path that you took and wonder what would have been different or should have been different or could have been different?
I think so. I definitely look back and wonder where I could have made changes in certain parts of my life that could have maybe helped or enhanced what happened. But in the end, it is what it is, and all I can do is learn from it. I can't sit back and beat myself up for not doing certain things, I guess. So sure. I just try to learn from them and not make the same mistakes and grow from it as a person and as an athlete.
What do you miss the most about the Navy SEALs?
Just the camaraderie, just your brothers, and that it's hard, it's every day you're with those guys more than you're with your family, and they become your family. And so, you miss that for sure. But I've built some really great relationships with my, CrossFit buddies and that, so that kind of helps there. And now I have my kids and training them or coaching them in wrestling and baseball. And, so I have enough things to fill my mind so I'm not sitting around, being sad about anything.
What's the higher level of competition, the Navy SEALs or in the CrossFit Games?
In what way, I guess? What way do you mean?
Well, look, as you said, when you go through buds and everything else, you're not wishing bad upon anybody, but you're competing with everybody there. You know, you look at the person next to you, and it's a challenge, and it's kind of the same thing, I guess, in the CrossFit Games, right? I mean, you don't want to see a guy not be able to get a lift in or anything like that, but you just know that you're competing against that guy.
Right. I feel like in the Navy it's different, right? Because like you want every one of those guys, especially the ones that you become friends with. You want them all to make it through, right? And you're competing against them, but there's no winner at the end of the day. I mean, the only winners are the ones that stick around. Like, and so it's almost like a pass fail, instead of where in CrossFit you're competing against these guys and you want to do better than them. You want them to be doing their best, but you want to be better than their best. And so in that aspect, I think competition wise, I would say CrossFit is more competitive. But it's just really different. I feel like I don't even know if it's like a really comparable thing.
Well, Josh, listen, it's been an amazing career in the Navy and certainly an impressive career in the CrossFit Games. And as you said, you're not done. So we wish you the best of luck going forward into the CrossFit Games. And, of course, best of luck getting your knee back on track. Obviously, that's going to be a big hurdle for you to clear. But it's been an amazing story, and we certainly appreciate you being part of Kill the Quit.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on. And, yeah, I'm proud to be a part of the Kill Cliff family and Killing the Quit. So,
Josh Bridges, thanks so much for joining us on Kill the Quit, brought to you by Kill Cliff. I'm your host, Mark Zinno. We'll see you guys next week.
WFON
and W292EV Marietta,
a Dickey broadcasting station.
live from the Wellstar Health System Studios.
1230 and 106.3 FM, The Sports X.